Hello, Wise West students. Today we're going to focus on the interview, and we're going to take a look at the interview as a source. So first, interviews are great sources. They're flexible. You can adjust questions or ask follow-ups and tailor them specifically to your own needs as you're there. Second, they provide different perspectives on the topic and can be a great place to find quotes that share those perspectives. They come in many different formats. Now more than ever, you can find video interviews online. You can find printed out interviews. And some of you will conduct personal interviews. Those are interviews where you perform them with someone of your choosing. We're going to focus on the personal interview, as many of you are going to use that as a source for History Day. So what are some ideas for interviewees? Because I know many of you will be asking this question. The first, and one of my favorites, is to think about searching for someone that has a personal connection to you. You might ask your family or friends if they know anyone who experienced your topic or lived during that time frame. This can give you a valuable experience from an American on that subject based on what their experiences have been. And these would be primary sources because they're from that time. Some examples that students have used at West include a grandparent on women's rights in the workplace. One student interviewed their grandparent and found out that he had hired the first woman on the plant floor. Another student discovered that their parent had been near Berlin when the wall came down and visited shortly after, so they were able to find out about that. Another student interviewed a neighbor on their impressions of the 1980 Olympic boycott and found out that their neighbor was totally against Carter's position and had actually fought against the boycott. And finally, we had another student who found out that a neighbor had held on to a farm for Japanese Americans when they were interned during World War II, turned the farm back over, including profits. And this can be a way to even find participants that you may not know of that are local. Sometimes it can be a good idea to even get two different perspectives. For example, for students doing Title IX, it might be nice to get both a grandmother and a grandfather's experiences on sports when they were growing up in high school. Second, look for event participants. Event participants would be people who are directly involved in an event, so clearly they would be a primary source. With this, a lot of times you might stumble across them in a website that has a contact link or organizations. Many times participants will be linked up with one of these if they're willing to be interviewed. For example, the VFW or American Legion is a great place to look for veterans on the Persian Gulf War. Or if you're studying the Holocaust, the University of Minnesota Center for the Holocaust and Genocide Studies has linked students up with Holocaust survivors. Some examples from students at West include a student protest survivor at Kent State, Alan Canfora. One group actually found his website where he shared photographs from his experiences that day, and he was willing to do an email interview with them, which they then used for quotes. Another time, using the VFW, another group was able to interview a U.S. naval officer who'd been at Pearl Harbor. Another group actually interviewed Barry Rosen, one of the hostages during the Iran hostage crisis, who was willing to talk about his events. And another group, by looking at the American Indian movement here in Minneapolis, discovered that Claude Belcourt, one of its founders, lived here in the area and was willing to give an interview with them. So again, don't discount looking at that Contact Us on a webpage. Sometimes you can't find a primary source, but interviews can be great and powerful as secondary sources as well. You could look for a group, an organization, or a company that's related to the event or topic. While a secondary source, this can still provide you valuable connections to today. Again, using website Contact Us links can be very valuable. For example, if you were looking at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you could maybe check in with the NAACP or Southern Poverty Law Center and see if they think that the goals of that law have been realized. If you were looking at women in the workforce today and wanted to look at their treatment and see if they think equality has been done or what work is today to be worked on, you could check in with the National Organization for Women in a local chapter. Some example that students have done includes interviewing a local chapter president of PETA, interviewing some workers at Medtronic about the pacemaker, getting in touch with the Minnesota League of Women's Voters to discuss women's voting habits today, and several people have contacted the historian at General Mills to discuss Betty Crocker and her role in advertising and in the company. Finally, don't forget that we're a big college town. You can also look for experts on a topic. This would be a secondary source, but can be real valuable. Look for official websites, organizations or foundations on a topic, or search history faculty department at the local colleges and universities to find professors that may teach about that time period or fit. This is a great way to find a secondary source if you're having some troubles. For example, you could look for a professor of American Indian Studies to discuss the American Indian movement. When looking at Clara Euland in the fight for women's suffrage in Minnesota, you might contact a professor of Minnesota history at the U of M or contact the Minnesota Historical Society historians. You could contact Susan Marks, the author of Finding Betty Crocker, to learn more about history there. Or talk with Medtronic, the creator of the pacemaker, as they made the first pacemaker. So now that we've thought of some ideas for our interviewees, it's time to think about some general guidelines and tips for the interviews themselves. First, when you're requesting an interview, many times we'll do it through email. Be sure to be polite and make sure to ask them and include contact information for yourself. Don't forget to explain why. Explain to them that you're doing a History Day project on their subject. You can also call someone to request an interview. Again, be sure to say your full name, explain what your request is, and tell them about the project that you're doing. Start early. It might take a while to actually make contact with someone, and you may have to try several different places, so don't wait too long. Be persistent. Once again, you might have to try several different people, and it may take a little bit of perseverance to get you that interview. Again, this is going to practice those real-life skills of communication that are important. Be organized. You might need to call them back from a school phone during the day and need their number. You might need to keep records of names and who you've called, etc., so that you know that you're trying someone new or you know how to contact them again. Be polite and mature. Remember that you're asking a favor of these individuals and they're sharing their time with you. And then speak and write clearly. Be professional. Remember, you're representing not only yourself, but also Wayzata West. Once an interview has been granted, the next step is to plan and write interview questions and get ready for the interview itself. Let's give you a few tips. First, plan and write your interview questions ahead of time. You want to be prepared so that you get the answers and things that you need, and you want to be clear. This will help you. We usually suggest about 6 to 8 questions with you taking notes so that you can ask follow-ups as well. We're going to have questions be approved by your teacher, as there are some questions that you may not realize could be tough. For example, you don't want to ask a Vietnam vet or a war vet how many people they've killed, but instead focus on the big picture and their experiences in a way that wouldn't bring up some traumatic topics. Having teacher approval will avoid this. 2, contact that person the appropriate way and be polite. They may ask you to phone them next, or they may ask you to continue with email. Continue using that format. 3, once an interview is granted, be sure to take notes during the interview and or record the interview with permission. Remember, you have your iPad, so you could take video if they agree and get the audio. This is a great place to get quotes and information about your subject from that person's perspective. If you conduct an email interview, remember to ask about the interview in one email, and then send the questions in another. Thank the interviewee at the end. Send them a thank you card. It's always a nice gesture. And finally, don't forget to record on EasyBib this source as an interview. You want to get credit for it, and it hopefully will be valuable to you. Good luck and happy interview hunting.